you what's the best angle. No. Yeah. Perfect. A little bit turn it because it's a little bit. If you can keep it to the left or the right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Perfect.
you look very much a Swami. Yes. Guruji, Swami. Okay. Shall we start?
Yeah.
Okay. I think Chitrakshi will wait for your call and then we start.
So wait, please wait. I'll
Okay.
tell you.
We do that.
It's got really cool, Anjali. It's a bit of ice also fell.
Seriously, I can't imagine, Vishwanath. It's so hot. It's been so hot. I'm a
Pretty
person.
Up
I
from the
was
hills, I know that. So the mountains.
Yeah, but I do very well with the heat. I hate the cold. I hate
Yeah.
it, and I don't do well with it. But this time the heat has been very difficult.
Wow. My computer is funny. Sometimes it refuses to say that your camera is not available. Sometimes it says that camera is available, and I think today I don't know how by miracle the camera is available, so I'm visible.
Your power has come, Vishwanath.
Yes, power has come back.
Yeah, the light is back. Yeah. Okay. Chitrakshi, what is the problem?
Sir, I am unable to go live on YouTube. I'll start the session and then we can. I'll try again going on live on YouTube.
What is happening?
Sir, we are unable to go live on YouTube. An error is coming.
Oh.
Okay, so we can start the session. People have joined and.
No. So do I start or we don't start? We wait for
Yes,
Let's start. We can start.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Chitrakshi. I'm sorry, I think because I was concerned because it's already 6 o'clock and 5 minutes, and we always started at 6. So thank you. Welcome. Welcome to the 112th episode of INHAF webinar series on Rethinking City. As you know, this is going on for almost 3 years now. And we had about maybe over 500 urban professionals, experts, resource persons, community groups from across the world, and literally from across the world, have shared their perspective, their vision, their ideas, their solutions, their approaches in terms of what do we do to make our cities better. In most of my introductory thing, I take lots of time to talk about what are the problems we have in our cities, and I'm not going to do it today because we have a shorter session and this is a different kind of format. But basically speaking, over the period of last 3 years, we discussed something like 50 themes and sub-themes on urban challenge. We talked about governance and housing and slums and resources and transport and climate change and finance. And in fact, today, by chance, I came across 34th webinar in the morning when and it was on right to city. And I really enjoyed it was about 34th or 35th one. So professional education, all kind of issues we have dealt with in the last 3 years. And we also had probably as many as 6 webinars on water. As many as 6, but different orientation, different contexts, different people. But we have dealt, as a matter of fact, Vishwanath was here a few months ago, I think 2 months ago, on 2 sessions, on the water issue. Essentially, at that time, we're talking about the problems of crisis in Bangalore. Today is slightly different because we are starting a new series called Water in the City. And next few weeks, we are going to have 5 or 6 conversations on this subject. We already lined up people. We're trying to kind of work out dates and timings. But basically speaking, looking at water in cities. An idea is slightly different than what we've been doing for a long time. Webinars have something like 4, 5, 6 people who talk about different aspects of an issue or a theme. In this new conversation series that we're starting with Anjali and Vishwanath, essentially there is one specialist and one person who understands the theme in the larger context get together and talk. And it is different. And for a long time, people have been telling me, why don't you really try out this particular mode of communication? And I'm very glad that we are starting it today with you. And I'm also don't want to take too long to introduce this, but I really want to kind of go a bit down memory lens in terms of saying that both Vishwanath and Anjali are core part of INHAF's growing up. Vishwanath was the one who worked on the constitution of INHAF. And I remember a long conversation and discussion with him. And as a matter of fact, the constitution that INHAF has at this point in time is something that Vishwanath put together. So Vishwanath, thank you very much. And Anjali is the one who made this tree grow. It was a concept, an idea when we started. And fortunately, very bright person that she is, very committed that she agreed to spend as many as 6, was it 6 years, Anjali? Yeah, probably about 6 years managing INHAF from Bangalore office. And that is the one where we learned a lot. I continuously take advice from Anjali on large number of matters and issues. In fact, today itself, I've sent out a note to her for another series we are starting on municipal finance. And I said, look, tell us who are the people we should invite. So we're continuously interacting and learning. So I'm very delighted and feel very privileged that 2 of you are here this evening. And we have a lot to expect from you. Vishwanath has done enormous amount of work on this subject. He is some kind of water guru now. And not only he's talked ideas, not concept, we also working at lakes in city. And now I think, 1 million shallow wells. And so he's not only one who theorizing and discussing problem, he's also telling how to go about doing it. And Anjali has very creatively looked at the whole issue of urban planning and how do we look at cities in the context of future. So with that sort of a background, with 2 remarkably, 2 remarkable, 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 2 remarkable capable people to conduct the session. I hand over to both of you, Anjali and Vishwanath, to conduct the session. Thank you very much. And please take your time and please, I think, decide how, as you think fit to develop the session today. Thanks.
Thanks, Kirti.
Anjali, you want to say a few words and then I could sort of.
Okay, so thanks, Kirti and INHAF for this opportunity to speak about a crisis that is just unfolding. Crisis, we will define that further as we move along, but something that is unfolding for most of our cities, popularly reported as a crisis, of course, and perhaps it is. And it's not just Bangalore, but it is a lot of the cities in India. We are already seeing the newspaper filled with reports from Pune and a couple of other cities saying that there is a looming water crisis that most cities will engage with in the coming months. And therefore, solutions are something that a lot of stakeholders are currently discussing. I was excited about this conversation simply because it allows me, while water, when you look at it as a resource, there are lots of how it is framed and how the solutions are, but this will allow, I thought the conversation would allow me to take a step back and say, okay, from the larger city perspective and from the lens, the hat that I wear, that of a planner, how do we look at some of the solutions? So that's the framing that I would like to bring in. And with that, I will hand it over to Vishwanath and let's see how he starts the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Anjali. Always a pleasure. I also happen to be an urban planner myself and working on water, and such a pleasure to be with you. And I still remember the day you walked into the office in Manipal Center when you just finished your planning in the School of Planning, and then you came into HUDCO, and that day is crystal clear to me. And both of us, one of us has gone older, the other has grown wiser. So I'll share the older person's experience. And as part of the conversation, I would like to just sort of frame it from the water perspective. So I'll just show you some slides, and we'll frame it both as a water issue at a regional scale, but also as a master plan and building bylaw. Not just a master plan, but a planning issue, perhaps at a city scale or at a regional scale. So let me just share some of the questions that I have in my mind, some of the key challenges, I think, which is in the water sector, and then we'll continue the conversation, right?
Perfect. Look forward.
So here goes, and I hope you're able to see the screen, right?
Yeah.
Good. Right. So they call it the challenge in urban India, and Bangalore as an example, as both of Anjali and me are from here. And this is this exemplar of the crisis in the current situation. But as Anjali was pointing out, it's not only Bangalore, but other cities, urban areas, which are facing this challenge. Not to mention urban areas, but also regional, rural areas too, which are facing the crisis. But our focus is urban India, and our focus right now, for example, is in Bangalore. So I'm trying to frame the issues for myself and as part of this conversation with Anjali. So is it a resource issue? Is it that water is running out? Or as some would have it, is it governance that is running out? Is a question that I have to ask myself. So are we running out of water itself? Or is there a management challenge that makes water unavailable to us? So that's one question that I hope to have a discussion. The second question is, should a city situate itself in a river basin? Is the river basin a right scale to consider water and its distribution allocation? Does the city have a right to water from a river basin as a hydrological unit? We know and understand at the broader India scale that it's agriculture which has the predominant consumption of water, and rightly so for food security and for farmers' livelihoods. But when we come to closed basins, how do we do a trade-off between agriculture versus urban industrial use, especially in what are called closed river basins? River basins where there's no surplus water to reach the sea, where all water has been used up for human consumption, essentially. How do we handle this? And do we have the right legal framework and the institutional framework to do this with justice and equity in mind? As Kirti was pointing out, the right discourse, the justice and access discourse. Is interbasin transfer of water inevitable for a megalopolis? And when I say megalopolis, I say if it's more than 10 million, it's a megalopolis. It's getting to megalopolis levels. And if you have these kind of megalopolis like Mumbai or Delhi or Kolkata or Chennai or Bangalore in the future, would interbasin transfer be the inevitable consequence? And should we be in a position to deal with it from an environmental or ecological perspective, not simply rejecting it? So these are some of the questions that I have in mind for myself. The other framing of the questions that I wanted to do, and this is as much about land as is about water, and it's the right to the city as much as the right to water in the city. Not an accepted principle. And how do we go about defining the right to water? Should we, for example, argue that, for argument's sake, 50 liters per person per day on a daily basis, drinking water should be given to every individual in a city, irrespective of financial means or legal barriers? What are the barriers for this access to human right to water? Are they only technical? Is it only a question of pipes not reaching the homes? Or are there physical barriers like the initial connection charge, the legal barrier where you're part of the informal settlement and therefore don't have a right to the city or land to the city, therefore you're denied water in the current construct, right? In the technical part of it, so I define the social, technical, institutional, financial, legal, and ecological. I call it the stifle model. In the technical, what are the debates around local versus regional? Which should get first priority? So if there are local waters from a lake, from a local aquifer, should that have first priority on a transfer of water from a pipe water supply from a river or a dam, as an example? In technical things, should decentralized sewage treatment plants have first priority over centralized sewage treatment plants, for example? The institutional component of it. Do we have the right water management institutions now? Most of the institutions that we have for managing water, parastatals, for example, Delhi Jal Board, Chennai Metropolitan Board, Hyderabad One, Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board, are 20th century institutions where water supply was their focus. So it's called the Bangalore Water Supply and Sewerage Board. Should it change itself to become a Bangalore Water Management Board, where management means and includes not just pipe water from the Kaveri in this particular case, but all forms of water, rainwater, lake and river water, groundwater, treated wastewater, and so on and so forth. And are these parastatals, which we have created for a specialized purpose, are they democratically accountable enough? And how do we imagine the democratization of these institutions, both at a ward level, but also perhaps at a city metropolitan planning committee level? How should we do that? Fiscal, the financial question, in my opinion, is the gorilla or the elephant in the room. Who should pay for water? Consumer or taxpayer? And what should be the transition from the human right to water as an economic good? And should we start to price in such a fashion that the institutions which provide us water are fiscally stable and capable of investing in leak repairs, in extending the services, in making capital investments for an expanding, growing city? And without that fiscal capability in the institutions itself, how will the institution deliver what we want as the basic service? The legal question, which is the right to the city itself, and Anjali, I hope that you will throw light on this, on the formal versus informal settlements, and where are we heading there? If we can't have cities where 50 to 60% of people are informal, or can we afford that? And if so, how do we then therefore deliver water to the so-called informal sector? What are the legal barriers for delivery of water to them? A Hakkupatra, a title deed, an electricity bill, proof of residence, proof of occupation of a particular land, ability to deliver a bill. All these are legal barriers. And beyond that, there are other extra legal barriers, which could include migrants, people from outside a state, people from outside a nation, and so on and so forth, refugees who are denied water for those grounds. And has nature a right to water too? The ecological consequence of it. Should our rivers flow clean? Should our streams not be clean? Should our lakes not be clean? And how do we imagine water as not just a human good to be consumed in pipes, but also as an element of nature and with the right for itself? And so therefore, in the case of Bangalore, the question is, are we or are we not part of the Kaveri Basin? And if so, are we or are we not entitled to some waters from the Kaveri River as citizens who occupy the river basins, all 14.5 million of us, right? And we sit on a ridge line, and it's a peculiar case where half of us are actually not in the Kaveri Basin, but in the Dakshin Pinakni Basin. Be that as it may, what is the right of the city to the river basin itself? So if we look at the city itself, some ideas emerge. We draw 1,450 million liters from the Kaveri. Is that a huge amount that we are drawing away? Is an urban area too much of a consumer of a regional resource? Are we therefore depriving others of water? Well, if you look at the numbers, Karnataka's allocation of Kaveri waters is 284.75 TMC feet as a number. Bangalore's share is 19, and an additional 11 TMC will come with the Kaveri fifth phase. So we'll take about 30. Currently, we take 6.67% of Karnataka's allocation. We will take it up to 11% of Karnataka's allocation of Kaveri water, but we support 40% of Karnataka's population in the Kaveri basin. Plus 60% of the state's GDP comes from this city, and it comes thanks to the water which comes from the Kaveri. So look at it net. We're only consuming 11% of Karnataka's allocation, Kaveri waters. So is the city truly unjust in its consumption? Is it a extractor on the body politic or the water politic of the river basin? Should we not look at what the city then does with the water? The city has the capability of returning the water because all urban water use is non-consumable, right? So it's returned back as used water or wastewater. The city actually gives back more water than it takes in a certain sense, both treated and untreated wastewater, because it adds to it with groundwater. So the city itself is a net producer of water in a strange sense in a river basin, unlike agriculture, which is a net consumptive user of water. So if you put water in a paddy field or a sugarcane field, it gets evaporated. But in an urban area, it comes back as used water. So therefore, should we seize on that opportunity that a city gives to us in terms of its non-consumptive use and make sure that it becomes a benign occupant of a river basin and actually a net producer of benefits for the river basin itself, right? So if we look at the city and its crisis, which is described, there's a set of crises which has existed forever in the city. It's not a recent crisis. It's those who don't have access to the network, the poor, unfortunately, people in the periphery, who have to pay the highest price for water. So if I'm a poor person in a slum who doesn't get good quality water, I pay 5 rupees for 20 liters of RO water, reverse osmosis water, which translates to 250 rupees a kiloliter. But if I'm connected to the pipe network from the Kaveri and I have a domestic connection, I myself here pay 7 rupees for 1,000 liters. So a rich person in occupying a house which is legally connected to the Kaveri system pays 7 rupees, and a poor person was to haul the water from an RO plant pays 250 rupees a kiloliter, right? So this sort of paradox. And of course, the democracy imperative, and we'll discuss this, how is our planning and our building bylaws and our governance made to be more democratic when we hadn't had a local body election for the last 3 years? We don't have anything called a ward committee, which is functionally democratic, capable of understanding what the water challenge is in the ward itself and how it should respond to the crisis, if there be any. So in the context of Bangalore itself, we know that the periphery or the peri-urban is always the challenge for every city because it's the one with most deprived of infrastructure. It's the fastest growing in the case of Bangalore. Also, the densest part of the population lives in these peri-urban areas where the challenge is the foremost. So how do we handle the peri-urban? How do we handle the transition of urbanization as it grows and absorbs rural areas and small towns? How should that be handled so that there is no gridlock of infrastructure delivery there and that there is justice in the delivery to that peri-urban in a quick, smooth manner because population is exploding incrementally in the peri-urban? So the question then, which I highlight in this sort of small chart, which is the Karnataka State Natural Disaster Monitoring Center's chart of the reservoir water levels. And I draw your attention to item 6.7, which is at the bottom, which I've circled. Currently, we have 11.08 and 6.97 TMC feet of water in these two reservoirs, which are the source of water for Bangalore city. So there's enough and more till June for the water to come in. But it's a precarious situation. And every year we seem to hit this precarious situation where we're counting on the monsoon to arrive on time for the city to survive. Can that go on? That's a question that we have to ask. And this is a clear case of allocation or distribution between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, which demands that everything be used up by June 1st so that you start from scratch for the allocation purpose for the new year. Also, the consequence of the fact that Karnataka has been allotted 284.75 TMC feet, but has only a storage capacity of 114 TMC feet. It can't really store all the waters that falls in its basin unless it manages it in a particular fashion. And then I draw your attention to Linganmakki there on top, which is 19.10 and which has 151.75 TMC feet of storage. Now, here's a dam which has been built for hydroelectricity. And if we are now electricity surplus and can afford to, should we not get Linganmakki waters to Bangalore city? Should that interbasin transfer from the Sharavati occur or not? The argument being made is that the ecological cost there is sunk. The dam has already been built. It has already submerged vast areas. The ecological destruction has been achieved. Should we not tap into this rather than build a new dam on the Kaveri and destroy the Kaveri Wildlife Sanctuary of 5,000 hectares? Is there a trade-off from an environmental perspective when we tap into an interbasin river just because that the city itself needs more water for the livelihoods of its people and for the economic engine the city is, right? And then the local waters issue. How do we understand the local waters? How do we understand the water flows, the hydrology and the hydrogeology? And in terms of the master plan, how do we protect our hydrology and hydrogeology? Both the building bylaws and the master plans are twisted not to be able to offer that protection. How should that protection be offered by the master plan and the building bylaw is a question that I'll ask you, Anjali, as we go along. And you will have to also reflect on the kind of forces that operate in terms of the real estate and other land forces, which constrict this ability to protect our hydrology and hydrogeology in particular. And also a brief reminder of history, the over-romanticization sometimes of the lakes as a system of water supply to the city, the dependence on it, which during the time of Great Famine was simply not enough to support 180,000 people, and that about 90,000 people died because the lakes ran out of water. And therefore, if you have to plan for 3 consecutive years of drought, is the local good enough? Or is it not good enough at all? So therefore, we should use the local waters as something else than just drinking water for ourselves, but something as a biological, social, cultural artifact, and a bit of it as a groundwater recharger for us, but not to say that we create full dependency on local lakes as the source of water. That's something that we need to do, because we know from history that we had to go to the river because we were not able to support a basic population of 1.8 lakh people. We now are at 14.5 million. We will be pretty soon 20 million people. Will the local waters in any sense be able to provide for this kind of a population in this kind of consumption? The creation of institution is something that I touched upon, that we created the 20th century institution, which the Bangalore Water Supply Sewerage Board in 1964, the first of its kind in India. But is it time to re-architect this institution with capabilities of hydrogeology, used water, and community engagement? We don't have a social development unit now. We used to have it in the BWSSB. We don't have it now. We don't have hydrogeologists. We don't have used water, reused water specialists. Should we not strengthen the institution to be capable of accommodating all these needs of a metropolis? And how do we change institutions is a question for us. Yeah.
Anjali, if we have lost Vishwanath, even for...
Have you lost me? Anjali?
No, not at all, not at all. I can hear you. Can you hear me, Vishwanath?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know, Kirti. Have you lost Vishwanath? Have you lost us? Kirti, can you hear us?
Kirti is frozen.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me just complete with the last 2 slides, because Kirti will go on. The thing is that now we have created verticals of institutions which unfortunately don't talk to each other in terms of synergies to be able to plan coherently. Can the master plan or that infrastructure plan or the development plan that you will talk about, Anjali, the structure plan, for example, how will it ensure cohesion and coordination by these various institutions which get responsible for water, for example? In the transportation sector, we have imagined an UMTA, Urban Metropolitan Transportation Group. Is there a need for an integrated urban water management kind of a thinking for us to emerge, for us to become more sustainable, right? So if you take from UMTA itself. Then finally, what is the scale of the city that we should be talking about? Is Bangalore the metropolitan area? Is it the greater area, Bangalore, or should we not be talking about the regional development area, BMRDA area, which would then encompass the Metropolitan Planning Committee? Should we not start to plan for all water, for all its needs in this whole big geography, so that we are really prepared for the future and we are climate resilient and sustainable at this scale? Should our thinking be limited to boundaries we draw, which are very narrow in terms of the metropolitan area, 800 square kilometers, therefore? Should it not be 8,400 square kilometers? And within that, we have the local planning authority jurisdiction, which has been carefully crafted. How are these local planning authorities actually talking to the BMRDA, talking to the Metropolitan Planning Committee? Are they effective? How should we make them more effective? Would they be able to incorporate water as a natural resource as part of the plan and protect it? Because they seem to have done a good job of conflict areas, potential conflict areas. And would water figure as one of the potential conflict areas, which they have highlighted here as part of the regional development plan map? And is this not a powerful tool for us to champion, for us to become more effective in the way we understand Bangalore itself as a global metropolitan city and therefore plan for its sustainability? Finally, the treated wastewater which the city exports to fill the broader tanks and lakes, should it not be the normal way for thinking of our cities where treated wastewater goes to climate change affected drought-prone districts in the surrounding areas, fills up tanks and lakes and rivers, and provides water security to farmers, in turn food security to the city? Should we not improve our treatment systems, make sure that there's no pollution load on the hinterland? And should this not be the way that the city imagines itself within the BMRDA area, for it to be supportive of all small towns, villages, gram panchayats, and farmers and agricultural land in this surrounding area with its treated use water, for example, for it to be therefore completing the circular economy and getting water for itself. And this is the transfer of water that you may be aware of. We are shipping water about 100 kilometers, filling about 200 lakes currently. Eventually, about 500 lakes in the surrounding areas will be filled, and more such demand is being put on the city system. Should we not think about the greater region in terms of water, food, and energy, all three combined together as we plan for our cities and sustainability? The last question to ask is, how much water does an individual need? Should we stick to the 150 liters per capita per day, which is the norm for metropolitan areas, or 135 LPCD? Should we not aim for 100 LPCD of good, clean water, some water for all, not all water for some? Therefore, we size our infrastructure for this 100 LPCD, target this 100 LPCD so that we are able to better distribute and get universal access to the water. So the discussion point for you, Anjali, what is the right form and scale of planning? Is it the city itself? Is it the regional development area? The transit-oriented development plans, which are now very much the focus of planning, which look at densification, increased FAR in narrow corridors, do they consider natural resources and water? Do they not disrupt hydrology and hydrogeology? How do we make them compatible with the natural resource demand that the city will put with that intensity of development with high rises on the metro corridors or the bus corridors? Is the CDP, the Comprehensive Development Plan, any longer relevant? And should we not therefore think of new forms of planning with the Karnataka Town and Country Planning Act, the role of the Metropolitan Planning Committee and ward committees, and within that, the building bylaws? How do we design them so that they are more water friendly in terms of being able to harvest and manage water? Some of the discussion points that I wanted to share with you. So I'll leave it at this as my sort of opening general comment, Anjali, and so your feedback, and we can have this conversation.
Okay, thanks so much, Vishwanath, for painting the canvas bold and large. A lot of the questions that you have raised many are rhetorical. I think almost you were answering those questions. I did note a few, given the time constraint, and I would like to focus on them, but I will just give a very, very brief context to how I'm going to address these questions. So I'll start from asking a fundamental question, which is like, what exactly is the problem today? Is the problem water scarcity, right? Is the city facing the problem of water scarcity? And cities across the country are, as I said earlier, they are going to go through a stress period, is what we are being told. We are also going through it. But we also know that all of us are facing increased heat at this point in time, right? The heat is obnoxious in Bangalore. In my 30 years of staying in Bangalore, I have not experienced this discomfort. And that's again something that is going to happen to all cities. So is the problem of water security, is the problem of heat, is the problem of water scarcity, heat, drought? And if we manage to live through these, are we looking at floods engulfing us as soon as the monsoon season comes, right? So I would like to actually look at these very intrinsically connected factors and then say, one, the first fundamental thing is, how do we then frame the problem? Is it only of the water stress, drought, or is it heat, drought, flooding, and whatever else comes with that, right? So that's the fundamental question for all of us. What I really think at the city scale, what this requires is a redefining of the problem, right? Now, this is not to say that water is scarcity or drought is not a problem. Yes, it is a problem. I'm looking at some of the things that you brought in, so I just want to touch on that. But okay, so now I won't go into you did touch upon some of the points as to how to redefine the problem, right? And I'm bringing in another factor over there, that how do we look at all these issues that the cities are facing and then redefine the problem. I'll go back once again to saying, if water scarcity is the problem we have, and the newspapers have been galore with solutions where we said, they're very reactive solutions. As soon as we go through a stress, how do you not use less water? How do you tankers which are supplying the water? How do you start to regulate them? How do you start to register them? So these are some of the reactive solutions that came up. Aerators, this, that. Immediately, we also started to have some responsive solutions, right? How do you start to look at your lakes? How do you start to look at your ecologies? What about the wells, surface water, groundwater? How do we deal with all this? And then what we do miss in the whole perspective, in this whole debate largely is a move towards having encountered this situation in a city like Bangalore and perhaps other cities in the country. How do we now, having encountered this situation, make sure in a very proactive manner that we are able to not have another round of this situation? And how do we proactively plan for that? And that's where I will come to some of your fundamental questions that you raised in your. I think to begin with, it is very important that we start to. I think the fundamental. Okay, let me start from the region. And could you put up your slide again, because I think the last one, if we can look at that one, and that would guide us in the discussion. Okay, now what is the right form and scale of planning? Does transit-oriented development take into consideration natural resources? Is the CDP any longer relevant? And the role of MPC ward committees and building bylaws? I'll not take it in that order, but I'll give a more woven response to this set of questions. To begin with, I think the fact that you showed the region and what it means. It's an 8,000 odd square kilometer canvas, and many cities today are defining their regions. Most of the southern cities have already defined their regions, statutorily defined their regions. Therefore, to look at the region the city in context of the region is the first fundamental thing that we need to look at. And let me reiterate over there, water or any other common resource that we have does not know administrative boundaries, right? So we need to start looking at the resource that flows across administrative boundaries. Administrative boundaries are only put there to enable certain sort of action. We did bring out, as you showed in the BMRDA, where that was the plan that I was leading at that point in time, we did bring out the conflicts. We did say that here is a land capability analysis that has been done. We are clearly saying these are the parcels of land which are capable for a certain kind of development, and all your planning units within that should follow. But I think the plan was much before its time, though it holds relevance today also, right? Now, the right form of planning, I strongly feel that we can't have a debate either this or that. We do need planning at the regional level. We also need simultaneous planning at the ward level. What we need to do in the current context, and if I was to take my earlier point of how do we move towards more proactive solutions, to at least to some extent, one, redeem ourselves for the situation that is already there, to also say that we hopefully will not encounter something like this. We need action as of yesterday. And what is that action? That action is both at the regional scale, as well as at the city scale, as well as at the ward scale. And perhaps I will go a step down and say at the neighborhood scale, right? Bangalore had lost a lot of its lakes. It's found its lakes back. Some of them have come back. But when they come back, water does not have a unitary expression, right? It has multiple expressions. It's about livelihoods. It's about social and cultural practices. It's about economies. It's about everything. Now, how do we start to manage this? And just to manage it through restoration of a lake, the recharge of a certain well, the harvesting of the rainwater is much needed, and it's a wonderful thing. And I really think the kind of awareness you have brought about around these things is just amazing. But I'm trying to push the envelope a little further to say, how do we now link these actions? And one of the things to be able to, one way to link these is to start visibilizing the system that existed, right? There are these cascading tanks. There are these Rajakalves that are there between them. There are buildings sitting on top of these Rajakalves. How do we start imagining, first of all, visualizing it? Because most of us we are not getting the larger picture. The plan does not do a good job of it. because our master plans, our regional plan is still better in the case of Bangalore, but our master plan actually just shows it as a blue or a green, but does not even look at what are the multiple functions that these blues and greens give us. It's not, there is a lot of conversation around blue and green infrastructure, but I think it's a blue and green network which embodies livelihoods, which embodies sociocultural practices and everything along with it. So the first thing is to conceptualize this as a network. And I'm not saying that I'm completely with you when I say that this is not the only thing that Bangalore needs to rely on for its water requirements. The moment we conceptualize it as a network which embodies livelihoods, one of the things that we need to do, and I feel it is very, very strong, and the master plan needs to do it, is break this binary between the rural and the urban. The perceived rural land uses, and I'm talking with my hat on as a planner, are pushed further into the hinterland, right? And the more we push them further, the more we increase the carbon footprint of the city, because we still need food, we need fodder, we need milk, we need fish. That needs to be brought from the hinterland into the city. What we have if we mark and visualize these blues and these greens as a network, inclusive of the livelihoods, and we need to incentivize these livelihoods, right? Then we actually start to provision the city through a network of blues and greens, which the city already has, which is lost in many ways, but it's also coming back. It's coming back in a limited way. So that's my first, yeah.
Can I just ask you a question on this very
yes.
specific one? I'm sure that you have a train of thought. I don't want to be interrupting it. Anjali, because you worked on the BMRDA plan and the BIA part, that the Bangalore International Area Planning Authority is one of the local planning authorities as part of the BMRDA, right? And they did a very interesting experiment, you may call it, or a trial in which they identified a special agriculture zone, right?
Yes.
That, what were the learnings of that special agriculture zone, and can we include these SSZs into part of the regional plan everywhere? And how do we incentivize it, the special agriculture zone? When you see that farmers sometimes, even now, are protesting on their land acquisition because they're going to lose their livelihoods, but the pressure of real estate and the pressure of industrial areas is so huge on them. How do we protect and incentivize these SSZs, you think, the special agriculture zones?
So one, agriculture needs to be brought into the city. We have to necessarily bring it back into the city. Some of the spaces where agriculture can be brought is within your blues and green spaces, the lakes, its catchment, and whatever else, its buffers. That's where it needs to be brought in. One of the things that I'm constantly telling is that we need to show it spatially on maps and say this is a non-negotiable for the city. You cannot have a built footprint on this, the built fabric footprint on this. But you need to have productive landscapes. You cannot put it to just recreation and health uses. You need to have productive landscapes. Agriculture needs to be incentivized in the city. How do you incentivize it? It's not very difficult. You need to, of course, as you rightly said, the real estate and the delta of land prices is a real impediment. But then we need to be able to manage that. And it's not difficult in a city like Bangalore. It's a larger conversation, but we can, and all I can say is that we've researched it, and it's not difficult in a city like Bangalore. Now, just imagine, let me give you an example. Through some of our research that we've done in different cities in the country, including Bangalore, as soon as we are reviving a particular natural ecology and we are fencing it off, and I'm not saying there is something wrong in fencing it off. Every time we are looking at the ecology in itself, right? It has a connection with the surrounding landscape. Now, what we are doing in the process when we are fencing it and not looking at the embedded livelihoods, we are displacing people who are then causing informality. So as a planning exercise, we are actually producing informality on a continuous basis. And then we are saying we do not want to actually provision this informality. What we are arguing with the government is that you please provide your basic services irrespective of the tenure of land. The city, it's not just about the formal, informal. This binary also has to be broken. Formal, informal, rural, urban, nature, humans, these are just binaries that we have created over a period of time, and we stick to it for whatever reasons. These need to be broken because on the ground, and broken within planning policy. On the ground, these binaries are very fluid, right? So we are constantly creating informality. How do we incentivize it? Let me give you an example, a lake that I visited in Bangalore. On one side of the lake, there was a huge urban land use, right? Big apartments and all kinds of uses. On the other side, you could still see agricultural land, which was now plotted. So the land had been sold off, and those farmers were now going to, one, the real estate value is very high, but farmers who are used to for generations looking at a particular livelihood, how do you actually want to? You're just displacing them. You're not really rehabilitating them. So that parcel of land next to the lake had to be incentivized and fenced within the lake to say that this is where agriculture will be produced. You can have lesser property taxes, you can have water to be given to those people, you can initiate markets over there, you can create loops around local economies, which is not difficult. But if you're sitting at the city scale, you will not be able to do it. You need to be doing it at the neighborhoods.
Perfect.
And that's
So,
where your
Anjali, I
ward
just want to
plan
push
comes
you.
in.
Correct. No, but I want to push you on this particular idea because it's such a wonderful and powerful idea in terms of we acquire land for industrial estates. We acquire land for road expansion. We acquire land for flyovers and metro. Why don't we acquire land for agricultural use, right? And
we need to acquire land for agricultural use. We need to acquire land for blue and green networks.
Absolutely.
If you are saying that I'm going to put a flyover here and I'm going to acquire land and I have money to pay compensation, you will also have money to pay compensation for actually institutionalizing that network and saying, here are the livelihoods. You will not need to acquire so much land as you can get into different kinds of arrangements with multiple stakeholders. It is very daunting if you're thinking of it. I keep repeating this as a city government. If you allow this to happen at a decentralized level, it is not so daunting. The role of the government at the city scale will then change.
Correct. So, Anjali, even with the BMRDA and with this, when you're saying, do you think we have the right institutional architecture to be able to do this? In my experience, for example, with the Water Supply and Sewerage Board, most of the design is done by consultants who give the design to the institution. The institution then tenders it out, and then it becomes work. It's the same with BPMP and BDA most of the time, right? It's consultants who do. So how do we reconstruct this institutional architecture to set these kind of goals for ourselves? Will the master plan do it, or are there other instruments to do it?
The tools and the approaches. Number one, I think in the long run, we need to rehash planning education. We need to rehash design education. And that's the long term. So if I start with planning schools today to say that, everything big is not beautiful. You need to have decentralized ways of thinking, managing, and working. That's the first. That's the long-term goal that we need to do. In the short term, definitely you need an instrument to actually bring a lot of these thinking together, right? You need somebody to hold the threads. And not because I'm a planner, but because I fail to see if there is any other instrument. I think the urban development, the master plan in itself becomes a very powerful tool. I also want to bring to the notice over here that our BMRDA Act is also one of the most powerful acts. And I heard an IS officer very young in my career actually say that this is much before its time. And because it is so powerful, the government has never notified its rules and regulations, but it is a coordinating mechanism. It has very strong provisions to coordinate different institutions within its jurisdiction, different organizations within its jurisdictions, and make them work along a certain line.
So is the time now?
Totally, it was yesterday, the time, if you ask me. It should have been done, right? The situation is already problematic.
So with the political construct of the Metropolitan Planning Committee, right? And the PMRD as a secretariat. That is the imagination that one could put in terms of the political and bureaucratic.
So I don't think there is a lack of solutions as far as the institution, organization, architecture is concerned. And we've already spoken about it. The NPC with the BMRDA, it's a secretariat. The municipal corporation with the BDA, assisting it as a town planning agency. Plans have to be made ward up through the various ward committees. You make those plans, you collate them at the local level, You iron out the differences at the local level, and the BMRDA is what the top down will work, right? So we can't have either or. If I think only my ward committees or only my TOD plans will do the job, no, that's not possible. You need a larger vision, and you need the smaller units also working. So that's how it has to really work, and everything is in place. It's a matter of putting it out there, starting it. And a lot of ward committees are meeting, but again, I feel they do not move beyond a grievance redressal mechanism. Nothing wrong in that, but I think we need to push the envelope there also to say, please start planning.
Thanks. I think great points that you make as such, but perhaps, Kitibai, you want to have the conversation now, opened up?
Yes, it will be wonderful. Chitrakshi, what I suggest we do is this, that let us pick up 2 or 3 questions to start with, if they are there in the chat box or question answer side, and use that opportunity in order to open up more and more. Can we start? Anjali, are we ready to kind of start any
Yes,
special?
yes, yeah.
Okay.
We can just have a conversation with people if they have any questions.
Let's open it up, and I think let's see. To begin with, if there are, Chitrakshi, if there are any questions, or even Anjali, you could say it, if there are any questions in the question box, we start with that. Otherwise, we open it up and see if people have questions on what has been said. Thank you.
So there are no questions in the chat box as far as I can see, or are
Okay.
they there? No.
Oh, okay. In that case, why don't you invite
Yes,
Anjali?
I'm happy to. Okay, if there are any questions, I think people can also just
Yeah, let them come, I
and
think, directly, I think, without worrying about putting them on the chat
correct.
box. Yeah.
Correct.
Any questions to these 2 wonderful presentations in the context of not only Bangalore, but the whole aspect of cities and water?
So, Anjali, the BMRD, as the questions come in and as when they come in, for me, the worry from a water perspective is the missing river basin institutions. We are simply not taking care of our rivers at all, especially the old growth forests in the Western Ghats. And it's a disaster waiting to happen. And so as much as we imagine the BMRDA, at the water scale, we have to start to think of river basin institutions.
Absolutely. And from the master plan perspective, for example, we need to start thinking of, let's say, Kodagu, right? How does the urban development of Kodagu can be steered such that we don't have problems and that's the larger thinking that we need to do. Yeah. Our sub-basins are already seems to
degraded.
Yeah. I think the first question would be for you, Vishwanath, which says, why are the water boards not addressing the point of distribution losses in supplying water?
So they are addressing the problem, and in Bangalore case, there is what is called district metering, which has been set up. We are lucky to have had retail metering for a long time. So we are actually confident of the amount of losses which happens in the distribution network. And the BWSSB has actually brought it down from about 51% to around 27% now. But remember that now onwards, if you have to reduce the leakage losses, it will take huge investments as well as large disruptions of traffic. Most of these water lines, are in very congested and narrow roads. And if you have to start to reduce that, it's going to come at a cost. With the operation of the Kaveri 5th phase, the overall loss in the system should come down to somewhere around 20%, which is a reasonable figure for a growing city like Bangalore. So in the Bangalore case, a lot of effort has been put in reducing distribution losses.
Any other questions?
Sorry, I think they're on the Q&A. I'm also trying to read them.
Yeah, so there's staying in Hyderabad, how different is the situation here for you? So Hyderabad has been, so if I have to answer it, Anjali, Hyderabad has been a bit lucky in terms of being able to source water from really far away sources. Krishna, Manjira has been one, Krishna has been one, and now they're wanting to tap water from the Godavari. The total volume of water coming to Hyderabad is way larger than what Bangalore is getting now. So overall, the resource itself is available in plenty. I think Hyderabad is now reaching out in terms of its distribution network to get more water to more citizens as connected. In a relative sense, Hyderabad is better than Bangalore in terms of water distribution. Michael Slingsby also has a very interesting question about water quality, right? So in the case of Bangladesh, as the question was put out, the whole thing happened because it was called the largest mass poisoning of its kind in the world. And that happened because thanks to UNICEF and British Geological Society, the surface water sources were given up and bore wells were sunk without testing them for arsenic. And it took 30 years for us to realize that we were doing arsenic contamination and poisoning. And it took an apology from UNICEF to come after 30 years of the poisoning that occurred. Yes, we have to be very careful when we use groundwater, and we have to be careful in checking for piped water supply. Luckily for us, groundwater dominantly in Bangalore is used for non-potable use. But we have to keep tabs on it, and we are lucky not to have fluoride and arsenic here in Bangalore. It's only nitrate contamination that there is. But when you throw both piped water supply and groundwater into the mix, we need to be very sure about groundwater quality and make sure that there's enough treatment for it to meet what is called in India, it's the BIS 10500, which is a drinking water standard. So all piped water which reaches people has to meet this drinking water standards when it's supplied. But we have to be very careful about water quality.
There's another question from Senegal, Africa, which says, what can we do for climate justice in the face of devastating and deadly of nature notes, then time of? I didn't understand, but if I'm getting it correct, I think what you're talking about is how do we ensure climate justice in a context where it is the changing climates are exacerbating existing vulnerabilities and exclusion. That's a real, and it's going to actually make the downward spiral that many of our cities are going through, make it even more tangible. And I think the only way to do it is to, I keep repeating this, that we need to mainstream natural ecologies in our planning. And I'm taking the planning lens once again. That's a fundamental problem that we have in our master plans, that we do not consider nature or natural ecologies are just treated as open spaces. You see, because our entire land use is premised on the economic value of land, we do not consider the ecological and the anthropological value of land. And the moment we start framing the problem, the fundamental thing we need to do is start bringing in the ecological value as well as the anthropological value of land when we are planning our cities. And that's very, very critical. The moment we do that, we will not be displacing people. If we do not displace people, we are already making an entry towards social justice or climate justice. And I think that's a starting point. We have to start doing that, as I keep saying this, as of yesterday. I think there's one more question I see. You identified a range of policies to achieve sustainable management of water resources. What are the political and institutional challenges in putting them into practice, and how can professions best contribute? Huge political and institutional challenges is what I would say, but nothing that is not resolvable. Yeah, I think it really, one of the things that I think a solution that we can work towards is really bring in a very decentralized lens to managing the system, to be able to respond to some of the problems and to be able to manage the system. Because we continuously try to control it from a distance, it becomes a huge problem. This is not to say, of course, you need to plan it at the larger scale, but a lot of the solutions lie at this local scale, and that needs to be brought in. From our perspective, I think action, policy, and plan at the local scale is completely missing. It's not that it's wrong, but it's missing. That's what needs to be put in place.
So I'll pick the next question, which I didn't answer for Michael Slingsby. He talked about privatization of water.
Yeah.
As you rightly pointed out, it has had certain consequences in the case of the UK. I don't think that water privatization is likely to occur in India in the near future that I can talk about. It is a state responsibility. It should continue to be a state responsibility. And we need to work on private sector participation at best in terms of technological investments and in terms of contracts that are done, but the ownership of water should rest with the water board. And I think that's the direction that India is likely to take in the near future. That's to answer my constituency. And we've learned lessons from Thames Water and other water supply systems in the UK, which have worked themselves into a particular situation and a particular place. And to answer Mr. Narayanan's question on the pricing of water, there is a willingness to pay, there's no willingness to charge. That is the negative dividend of democracy. No political party wants to bite the bullet and raise the price of water. The BWSSB has sent in a proposal 4 years back, still not being considered. So water is heavily subsidized, which means that the rich get the subsidy and the poor pay the price for water in terms of health, in terms of distance traveled, and in terms of the real cost of water itself. We have to get the financial architecture right if we want to be genuinely pro-poor. We have to make sure that water is priced at its true ecological value and that therefore those investments made are pro-poor. The poor should have first charge on piped water network. The rich should do the rainwater harvesting, the groundwater recharge, and the wastewater treatment and recycling. The poor should not be burdened with that. The poor should have the human right to water first with universal coverage. There's no doubt on that particular front. And I think we're not doing so well on it.
Agree. Can I take one question? Vishwanath, I have a question for you. We keep talking about the integrated urban water management systems, right? Could you elaborate a little bit and say how does one actually move from a concept to a more tangible action on the ground, and what would this entail? How can this be done?
I'll give you a practical example, and you've asked a very tough and theoretical question, but I'll explain to you how it works. Take the town of Devanahalli, where the international airport is located, with a population of 40,000 people, right? What integrated urban water management means is that we take rainwater, we take surface water, we take groundwater, we take treated wastewater and piped water and plan all together for all these 5 forms of water. So in Devanahalli, the town municipal council has revived the lake with the help of NGOs and other funding agencies. The lake has been cleaned up, ready to receive rainwater whenever it rains because the catchment has been linked to the lake. So rainwater is being harvested and a surface water body protected. This lake recharges the shallow aquifer and keeps the open wells full. I'm not even talking about deep bore wells. It's dug wells, which are full of water thanks to the lake being filled, and the geology of that particular place. The lake also is filled with treated wastewater from Bangalore, which is diluted in a lake called Bangalore, and then it comes to Devanahalli Lake. So therefore, it gets a component of treated wastewater. Once this water emerges in the well, it's already been pre-filtered by the earth. It's called managed aquifer recharge. The small water treatment plant has been set up there, which treats the water and purifies it and supplies it as domestic water supply to Devanahalli town. So this is IUWM in practice, where rainwater, surface water, groundwater, treated wastewater, and piped water are all integrated. And what we find, Anjali, which is very interesting in the IUWM case there, is that the cost of production of this water is only 1.50 rupee per kiloliter. And one of the biggest lessons we've learned is the higher the groundwater table, the lesser the cost of energy that is needed to pump it. So it means a lot to raise the aquifer levels. And 2 other points which IUWM does, and which is what you discussed, is that it provides livelihoods. The lake continues to provide livelihoods to fishermen who fish in this lake and are able to harvest fish as part of the fishermen's cooperative there. Plus, it enhances biodiversity because a portion of the lake is a wetland, and so it's home to a lot of bird and mammalian biodiversity. So ideally, an IUWM will satisfy the human need for water after first satisfying the livelihood need and then the ecological needs of nature itself, then becoming available to people. This is an example of IUWM.
Thanks, Vishwanath. Yeah, I've been reading about it, but yeah, for me, I think, why is Bangalore's wastewater taken to Devanahalli, and why is it not used in Bangalore itself?
So it's a political decision because it's a yuck factor. The city resists treated wastewater being used. Farmers have been addicted to untreated wastewater. They know how to use it on the land, and land is very good in capturing the nutrients from the wastewater and converting it to crops, right? So there was a political demand for this water from Bangalore, and there was a dimension to it because otherwise it was flowing to Tamil Nadu. So therefore, the decision was, why should even treated wastewater go to Tamil Nadu? Why don't we send it to the farmers of Kolar and Chikballapur? And therefore, this is the second largest project of its kind in the world, next only to that of Mexico City, where 880 million liters per day is being transferred, and a future 800 million liters will also be transferred. So that's how this project occurred. And I should also point out that it was the then agriculture minister who himself championed it and got it done.
I see one more question, and I think, do we have the time for the last question? Big companies are entering the water supply industry in monopolizing the water sources, preventing public free access.
Oh, I couldn't read it. So it's big companies getting in, is it?
Oh, do you want me to read it out? Are you able to read it in the question answer tab? It is in the Q&A tab.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. No, you could read it out. I couldn't.
Big companies are entering the water supply industry in EU, monopolizing the water source, preventing public free access and uses. Politic is supporting this trend with rules and laws. Planners have little space to practice alternative use of water, even in private areas, because of this oligarchy. Do you know examples of public reclaim of water use and access?
So I can only give examples from France, where I think there's been a drive towards remunicipalization of water.
Correct. Yes.
That's what I know of. I don't know too much about it. Luckily, in India, water is still a state subject, and the state is the dominant player in it. Unfortunately, it's the state failure to deliver water to every individual which has caused the market to emerge. All our bore wells, private water tankers, water filters, everything has emerged because the state does not deliver the requisite quality of water and quantity of water on a 24/7 basis. So the more we empower our state institutions, the more we make sure that universal water access is there, the lesser the role a market will have. And that's good for for us as citizens.
At least in the context of Indian cities, water needs to be a state, as a public good, basically. Yeah.
It's in wastewater that there could be a lot of private sector participation in recovering both the energy component of it and the nutrient component of it, plus treating it. But even wastewater should be seen as a public good first. And the first right of wastewater should be for agricultural use. The second right should be for ecological use. And the third right should be industrial urban use. Because the question that needs to be fully answered now is, who owns water? And then the next question is, who owns wastewater?
And yeah, sorry, Kirti, you were saying something.
No, I think after only I think, when you're ending, I have two questions to ask. So I thought,
please go ahead.
No, one is the one question. I think this is to you, Vishwanath. I think I went to my doctor today and asked him to join this conversation. He said, I'm not able to come, but I have a question which I go on asking to all people. No one answers me. He said, if you have water problem, why don't we desilt our oceans? Why do we kind of remove salt from this? Israel is doing. It's a question of cost. But cost is something. Is it, look, if the world decides to kind of reduce 15% on if armament machinery, we will have enough money to kind of. So he said, don't worry about money. Technologically, why is it not possible? And why are you people talking about water crisis? There's so much of water in the sea. Why don't you kind of clean it up and use it?
So I would just add to that question, Vishwanath.
Please,
I mean, actually, it's not a question. I'm just going to provoke a little bit. It's not just a question of technology. I'm also bringing the question of ethics over here. Is it ethically the right thing to do? Is what I'm asking.
So here's the thing. Desalination will be a part of the answer. Some parts, let's say island states, which don't have any other access to water, and coastal areas will need to desalinate water. It will be part of the solution, but it has environmental consequences. We need to know that it consumes a lot of energy, even now that there is carbon emission for every kiloliter of seawater desalinated. Plus, the rejects, the brine that goes in, has been known to alter the biodiversity in the area where it has been rejected. Exactly. So we need to draw balance between that. But, Kirti, I'd like to point out, the biggest access to water that we have is desalination, and it's nature created. It's called rain. The sun does the desalination for us and dumps 4,000 billion cubic meters on us. It's already part of nature's scheme of things. Why don't we harvest rainwater more proactively? Therefore, your doctor will be happy that it's desalinated water coming to him, and you'll be happy that he reduces your bill, for example, for the visit that you have to him.
No, he doesn't. He's a friend of mine. He doesn't charge me ever.
Yeah. He's one of the other good and noble-hearted people there.
The second question, Anjali, can I?
Yeah, yes, please.
And I think this essentially, this conversation has inspired me to not a question, but request both of you. We are in the process of designing what I call loosely urban Manrega. Basically trying to kind of put together a program for the urban people, urban labor. And you're talking about this integrated water system, talking about jobs, employment, ecology, water resource. And I've been telling to my colleagues that we could to think about this, that, it's not only, I think, static way of looking at Manrega, but I think a more creative way of doing this. So you're not talking about state subsidizing it all the time. You're trying to kind of create this whole system, probably a little more self-sustaining, more. Can one take water and its backward forward linkages in the context of doing this? Because we're talking about, using this in order to kind of improve cities, in order to improve, I think, service delivery, in order to kind of do what city doesn't do. Similarly, can this be taken to water sector and thought it through and plug it in the whole design process? And I think both of you are experts, so I thought I'll ask this question.
From my perspective, yes, of course, it can be done, but I think we need to also shift the whole narrative from creating jobs to creating livelihoods. And that's something that, there's a difference.
Well,
These terms
this
are
is certainly
used
on livelihood, maybe
it has to be around livelihoods. And
Yeah.
yes, a lot of livelihoods are, but again, I would urge you to not think of it as a singular element. It does not have a singular expression, but to think of it in its multiple manifestations, and then definitely livelihoods can be built, and they've always been there. What we are doing is we are constantly displacing them. That's the problem that we are doing, and we don't create commensurate jobs. The idea is to move from a traditional economy to a modern economy, to move from livelihoods to jobs, but we displace those livelihoods and we do not create the jobs. That's where informality is getting created, and we are doing it consciously, unconsciously, all the time through plan and policy.
So just to add to what Anjali is saying, is what we've done is to imagine water as a social livelihood sector first, right? That's the lens you want to bring on it first, not just as something that flows in pipes and not only capital infrastructure. So when we say that you dig 1 million wells in Bangalore, the whole concept is, can the traditional skills of the well diggers be used to make recharge wells so that they push rainwater into the aquifers, realize the groundwater levels to come up, and therefore get water security to the city through a livelihoods approach. Now, how do we imagine incentivizing this? There's a strange perverse incentive in Bangalore that if you start to use your well water, let's say you do a good recharge, your well has water and you start to use it, you have to pay 100 rupees a month extra because the institution argues that you are releasing sewage into the system, therefore you have to pay as a sanitary cess. So if you are able to twist that around and incentivize wells and incentivize well digging, automatically the skill is rewarded. Similarly, plumbers are incentivized, have been trained to do rainwater harvesting structures, put in the filter, make it sure that it gets connected to the sump. They can be somebody who can, whose skills can be upgraded, and the bylaw already makes it mandatory to do that. So therefore, you're pushing it through the legal system and through the skill system for them to have more jobs. We need to reimagine that and think and move that. And the final one, which is most interesting for me, is that there are a couple of plumbers who actually go about putting meters for every flat in an apartment, and they've learned the skill on their own. And they figured out that if every flat is metered, the consumption in the first month itself comes down by 40 to 50%. Volumetric understanding of it is a clear signal that the overconsumers reduce consumption, right? So How do we go about metering the 2 million properties that are there in Bangalore, can create a job or a livelihood for a certain set of people? So we need to look at the sector, as you rightly pointed out, from a livelihoods perspective. Perhaps not in the same Narega way, but in a different way for a city where the wages themselves are not subsidized, but the product is, and there is an incentive for people to do that product.
Sorry.
I completely agree with it, but anyways, in the interest of shortage of time, I think we also need to reimagine a lot other kind of livelihoods, which will start provisioning the city as a whole, and that's very, very critical. And I'm not saying we've cracked it, but you need to think through incentives, you need to think through disincentives, right? And how do you actually do it? I mean, I think the solar heaters in Bangalore has been a success story, and the incentivization around that has been, I don't know why we never brought it around water. As you said, it's a perverse way of looking at it. Vishwanath, there is, and I would like to answer this question, which is what I would wanted to also bring to you, both Joel and Narayanan actually talk about desalinization and saying that how it is adversely impacting the health of people. What I have read in the news, and I'm adding to this question, is that, even the treated water that is going into, say, Kolar, we read in the news that the vegetables there that are being produced and supplied to the city, they are not the best quality. And therefore, one of the reasons was because of the quality of water. One is the quality of water. So how does one ensure that that quality is to an extent which does not impact health of the larger populace, but also looking at, and these are two connected questions that I would like you to reflect on.
Yeah. So very quickly to answer that, desalination and even RO strips water of its minerals and therefore has negative impact on human beings. And we are realizing that now more. So more and more RO systems and desalinization systems are looking at remineralization, right? So once we understand the problem, we have to address it and make sure that we don't strip it of all calcium, magnesium, everything, every mineral. We need to remineralize it. In terms of the wastewater, Anjali, that particular study actually did not correlate where the produce was brought to the city, did not look at the source of water, just appended a secondary study and then created a scale. Let me tell you, the treated wastewater that is flowing into Kolar and Chikmagalur does not have heavy metals when it leaves the sewage treatment plants. It's being thoroughly monitored and checked, right? But we need to keep that monitoring in such a fashion that it's open to public knowledge and that we create a system of trust in the quality of treatment we do and persuade the farmers to understand that they too themselves can check the wastewater quality and be assured of what it goes there. It is possible that treated wastewater is recontaminated in certain lakes in the periphery of the city. That needs to be made a point of management and monitoring so that we don't do that. Once anything gets a bad name, it's very difficult to get it back, right? So therefore, supplying treated wastewater, rainwater harvesting, desalination is not so much just a physical exercise, but an exercise in communication. And we seem to lack the skill to communicate the truth at all points of time so that we create a partnership and a sense of trust.
I think,
we got to wind up.
Yeah.
Before I do that, I think, Vishwanath, I'm sorry, I think I won't let you go. This is the question which my grandson asked me. He's only 9 years old. That, don't you think that our way we live in our houses, like say, for instance, very fact that this 8-year-old child, I think, flushes a toilet every time he pees. And I think, maybe wastes 3, 4, 5 liters of water. He gets this completely wrong message about water and its use. Is it possible to kind of rethink the whole technology about water? And I know this is a subject we've talked about extensively. But I think, now that we reach a stage where we are talking about, I think, vacating cities and I think, crisis in cities, isn't something should happen where this, yeah.
We seem to get on a moral pedestal very quickly with ourselves, right? So when the flush toilet came and when underground sewage network came, it was the great saver of lives. It has saved more lives in history than anything else. Our realization of the germ theory of disease, the fact that we need to take our waste away and keep it separate from our water supply system, has saved us from cholera, plague, you name it, jaundice, typhoid, and many, many more diseases. It saved us. Now comes the question of how much water do we flush when we pee, right? Our WCs are becoming really 25 to 30 liters. Now they flush 3 and 6 liters, right, in a dual flush system. So we got to be really efficient with that. The final point I want to make, Kirti, is that we should not riddle even the act of peeing with guilt, right? So swimming is guilty, washing your car is guilty, watering your garden is guilty, taking a crap is guilty. This is not the society that we need to create for your grandson or my grandchild, right? Let's remember this. If we pay the true ecological cost of water, and what's the true ecological cost of water? The true ecological cost of water is when we return it back to nature at the same quantity and quality at which we appropriated it, right? If we take 100 liters from the Kaveri River, we are now technically in a position to return it back to Kaveri at the same point, at the same quality, with the membrane technology and many other technologies. If we pay the true price for water, if you and me pay 95 rupees a kiloliter, there is no shortage of water at all. And you can flush away merrily and pee away merrily. Right. There is, of course, a small bit of energy cost. So we need to deconstruct several myths. And I think one of the myths also is that this wastage of water, you need a certain amount of water for self-cleansing velocity. Yeah.
Sorry, I think I lost you in between, Vishwanath. So
sorry. I think so. Yeah. So
yeah.
So it's a question of understanding the true ecological cost of water and paying the true ecological price for it. If we do that, there's no scarcity of water.
I think the elephant in the room is also a behavioral change around certain ways of looking and using things. And that one, it doesn't have to be two ends of the spectrum. As you said, we don't have to guilt ourselves into anything, but there is that somewhere on the spectrum where we try to bring in a certain balance, and that will really come through a change in behaviors for some.
Thank you. Thank you, Vishwanath. I remember distinctly that the last conversation that we had on this platform, this is exactly where you ended. You said, Kirti, you're trying to make people feel guilty. And I really think it's very necessary that we make them guilty, because this is going on in a very bad way. But thank you very much, Anjali. Thank you very much, Vishwanath. This was very very thought-provoking. And as a matter of fact, a number of people have spoken. And I see people are coming from all over. I don't know how this is reached there. And I'm very delighted that this happened. And we will, I already have, I think, a number of people asking me for the recording. And I think I want to tell them that, recording will be available most probably by tomorrow afternoon. And we look forward to, I think, such conversation. And thank you very much, Anjali, and thank you very much, Vishwanath, to having started this process very well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
you very
you
much.
for giving this
Meera, I'll get back to
Thanks
you, Meera. Definitely, I'll get back. Professor Meera Mehta is there, my professor. So I want to say a big hello to her and say that I'll get back.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for giving this opportunity. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, there are many questions on questions answered. Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And thank you, Chitrakshi, I think, for all the help. I
Yes.
shouldn't forget thanking you.
Thank
And
you,
Bhuma is not there, but Bhumaji too. I'm sorry you're not well, but please get well soon. And I think we look forward to have you on the second episode, which will take place sometime next week. Thank you very much. And is Meera Mehta somewhere around? Meera, when we're going to get on the phone to talk about this?